The rain battered the windows of the King County Courthouse in Seattle, a gray shroud hanging over the city on March 23, 2025. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of old wood and anticipation. 17-year-old Elias Carver stood at the defendant's table, his worn sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished floor as he shifted his weight. His hoodie, faded navy with frayed cuffs, hung loosely on his thin frame, and his dark hair fell into his eyes, obscuring the sharp intelligence that simmered beneath his unassuming exterior. To the packed gallery, he looked like just another troubled kid caught in the system's grip. To Judge Margaret Hensley, he was an annoyance, a case to dispatch before lunch. Elias faced charges of cybercrimes, hacking into a local tech company's servers and allegedly stealing proprietary code worth millions. The prosecution claimed he'd sold it to a competitor, painting him as a reckless delinquent with a laptop and too much time. The evidence seemed ironclad: IP logs traced to his home, encrypted files recovered from his bedroom, and a witness from the company swearing Elias had bragged about the breach online. It was the kind of case that made headlines: "Teen hacker threatens tech giant." The spectators whispered, some with disdain, others with morbid curiosity. Judge Hensley, a stern woman in her late 50s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, presided over the courtroom with an air of detached authority. Her sharp green eyes flicked over Elias, sizing him up as she adjusted her glasses. She'd seen countless kids like him, defiant, lost, or just plain foolish. Leaning forward, she tapped her pen against the desk, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, Mr. Carver, I hope you've enjoyed your little adventure in cyberspace. Perhaps you thought you'd impress your friends by playing outlaw? This isn't a game, young man. Real people lost real money because of you." A ripple of laughter spread through the room. The prosecutor, Victor Langston, a wiry man with a perpetual smirk, adjusted his tie and nodded in agreement. The public defender assigned to Elias, a frazzled woman named Sarah Patel, fidgeted with her notes, clearly unprepared for the complexity of the case. Elias didn't react. His hands remained clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed but deliberate. He'd spent months preparing for this moment, not as a defendant, but as something else entirely. The judge's mockery didn't faze him, it was fuel. Langston rose, his voice smooth and practiced. "Your Honor, the state will demonstrate that Elias Carver knowingly infiltrated NexusTech's servers on December 15, 2024, bypassing multiple security layers to extract sensitive code. We have digital forensics linking his IP address to the breach, chat logs where he boasts about his skills, and a sworn statement from a NexusTech employee, Mr. Derek Henshaw, who claims the defendant contacted him to gloat. This is a clear-cut case of theft and arrogance." The gallery murmured, heads nodding as if the verdict were already written. Hensley sighed, glancing at Elias. "Do you have anything to say before we proceed, or are you just going to stand there looking like you missed the bus to school?" More chuckles. Sarah Patel opened her mouth to speak, but Elias raised a hand, a subtle, commanding gesture that silenced her. She hesitated, then sat back down, bewildered. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor," Elias said, his voice steady and clear, cutting through the room like a blade. The laughter stopped. Hensley blinked, caught off guard, then smirked. "Oh, this ought to be good. You think you're a lawyer now, do you? Watched a few episodes of some courtroom drama and figured you'd give it a whirl?" Langston snorted, crossing his arms, while the bailiff exchanged an amused glance with the stenographer. Elias didn't flinch. "With all due respect, Your Honor, I don't need a TV show to understand the law. I've studied it for years, statutes, precedents, procedure. I know my rights, and I know this case better than anyone in this room." The boldness of his words hung in the air, daring someone to challenge him. The judge's smirk faded slightly, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "Fine," she said, waving a hand. "Go ahead and make a fool of yourself. The floor's yours." Elias stepped forward, his sneakers silent now, his presence shifting the room's energy. He'd grown up in a cramped apartment with his single mother, Lena, a librarian who taught him to devour books, any books, since he could read. While other kids chased sports or video games, Elias chased knowledge. By 12, he was dissecting legal texts borrowed from the library, fascinated by the interplay of logic and justice. By 15, he'd taught himself coding, blending his twin passions into a razor-sharp intellect. He wasn't just a hacker, he was a strategist, and this courtroom was his battlefield. "Your Honor," he began, turning to face Langston, "the prosecution's case rests on 3 pillars, the IP logs, the chat transcripts, and Mr. Henshaw's testimony. Let's start with the IP. Mr. Langston, can you confirm the exact time the breach occurred?" Langston frowned, flipping through his notes. According to the forensic report, it was 11:47 p.m. on December 15th. Your IP was pinged at that precise moment. Elias nodded, almost casually. Interesting. Because at 11:47 p.m. I was at the Evergreen Community Center, 3 miles from my house, attending a coding workshop. There's a sign-in sheet with my name, time-stamped by the instructor, and security footage to back it up. I'd like to submit that as evidence. He slid a folder from his hoodie pocket, prepared, meticulous, and handed it to the bailiff. The room stirred, whispers growing louder. Hensley's eyes narrowed. "You're saying someone else used your IP?" Elias met her gaze. "I'm saying it's possible, Your Honor. My apartment building has shared Wi-Fi. Anyone with basic skills could spoof my address. The prosecution didn't investigate that, they saw my name and stopped looking." Langston scoffed. "That's speculation. The logs are clear." "Are they?" Elias countered, his tone calm but unrelenting. "Because I've reviewed the forensic report, publicly accessible through Discovery, and the timestamp on the server logs doesn't match the prosecution's timeline. There's a 6-minute discrepancy. Either their expert missed it, or they hoped no one would notice." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I noticed." The gallery buzzed. Hensley leaned forward, her pen still for the first time. Langston's smirk faltered, and Sarah Patel stared at Elias like she was seeing him for the first time. This wasn't a kid stumbling through a defense, this was a mind at work, dismantling the case piece by piece. Elias took a breath, knowing he'd only begun. The judge's mockery had lit a spark, but what came next would set the courtroom ablaze. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elias stood at the center of the courtroom, his hoodie now a symbol of defiance rather than defeat. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, but inside, the storm was just beginning. Judge Hensley tapped her fingers against the bench, her earlier amusement replaced by a grudging curiosity. The gallery leaned forward, hanging on Elias's every word, while Victor Langston shuffled his papers, scrambling to regain control. Elias had exposed a flaw in the IP evidence, but he wasn't done, not by a long shot. "Let's move to the chat transcripts," Elias said, his voice steady as he turned to the jury, 7 men and 5 women, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. "The prosecution claims I bragged about the hack in an online forum, using the handle, Code Phantom. They've submitted screenshots of these messages as evidence. Mr. Langston, can you confirm the account was registered to me?" Langston straightened, sensing an opportunity. "The account was traced to an email address linked to your name, Mr. Carver. It's in the report, Elias. Carver03@gmail.com. You posted about bypassing Nexus Tech's firewalls, calling it child's play. Arrogance in your own words." He slid the printed transcript across the table, triumphant. Elias didn't blink. "That's one interpretation. Here's another." He pulled a second folder from his hoodie, how many did he have stashed in there, and handed it to the bailiff. This is a record from Google, obtained legally through a data request. It shows that Elias Carver03@gmail.com was created on December 16, 2024, one day after the alleged breach. The first login came from an IP in Spokane, 200 miles from my home. I've never been to Spokane. The jury exchanged glances. Hensley raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting someone impersonated you? Elias nodded. Exactly. Anyone can make an email with my name, it's not hard. The prosecution didn't verify the account's creation date or location because it didn't fit their story. They saw what they wanted to see. Langston's face reddened. That's absurd. The messages match your style, your obsession with coding. Elias tilted his head, almost amused. My style? I've been coding since I was 13, teaching workshops for kids at the community center. I don't brag online, I help people learn. If I were Code Phantom, why would I use an email so obviously tied to me? It's sloppy, and I'm not sloppy. He turned to the jury. Ask yourself, does that sound like someone smart enough to hack Nexus Tech, or someone setting me up? The room hummed with tension. Hensley cleared her throat. Mr. Carver, you're throwing a lot at us. What about the witness? Mr. Henshaw claims you contacted him directly. Elias pivoted smoothly. I'm glad you brought that up, Your Honor. Let's talk about Derek Henshaw. He stepped closer to the jury, his voice softening but gaining weight. Mr. Henshaw says I called him on December 20th, gloating about the hack. The prosecution submitted a phone record showing a call from my number to his. Sounds damning, right? Except, he pulled out another document, this one a crisp phone bill. On December 20th, my phone was off. I'd dropped it in a puddle 2 days earlier, and it was being repaired at TechFix on 3rd Street. I've got the receipt, time-stamped, and the technician's statement confirming it was in their possession. Langston jumped up. Objection. This is new evidence, he can't just spring this on us. Hensley shot him a look. You had access to discovery, counselor. If he found this and you didn't, that's on you. Overruled. Langston sat, fuming, as Elias continued. Someone spoofed my number, another basic trick. Mr. Henshaw's testimony hinges on that call, but he never met me in person. He assumed it was me because the caller said so. That's not proof, that's hearsay. The gallery erupted in whispers. Hensley banged her gavel once, silencing them. Enough, she said, her tone sharp but her eyes locked on Elias. You're saying the entire case against you is fabricated? Elias met her gaze. I'm saying it's built on quicksand, assumptions, not facts. And there's more. He took a deep breath, the room hanging on his pause. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness. Someone who can explain why Nexus Tech's code was stolen, and why I was framed for it. Hensley blinked. You want to call a witness? Now? Elias nodded. Yes. Her name's Riley Voss. She's a junior developer at Nexus Tech, and she's waiting outside. She'll tell you what really happened. The courtroom stilled. Langston's jaw dropped, and even Sarah Patel gaped. Hensley hesitated, then waved a hand. Fine. Bring her in. The bailiff moved to the door, and moments later, Riley Voss stepped inside, a young woman in her 20s, nervous but resolute, clutching a laptop bag. Elias gave her a small nod, a silent signal of trust. He'd met Riley months ago at a coding meetup, bonding over their shared love of problem-solving. She'd tipped him off about the breach, and the setup, risking her job to help him. Riley took the stand, her voice trembling at first. I've worked at Nexus Tech for 2 years. Last fall, I overheard Derek Henshaw talking to someone about selling code to a rival company, Cipher Labs. He needed a scapegoat, someone young, easy to pin it on. Elias's name came up because he'd been asking questions at a tech expo about our security flaws. They framed him to cover their tracks. The gallery exploded. Hensley slammed her gavel repeatedly. "Order," she barked, but her eyes burned with something new, respect, maybe, or disbelief. Elias stood tall, the hoodie kid no longer a punchline. He'd cracked the case wide open, and the real fight was just beginning. Riley Voss gripped the edges of the witness stand, her knuckles white as she faced the courtroom. The rain had stopped, and faint sunlight filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Elias stood nearby, his hands in his pockets, watching her with quiet confidence. Judge Hensley leaned forward, her earlier sarcasm replaced by a steely focus. Victor Langston, however, was unraveling, his tie askew, his notes scattered as he tried to process the bombshell Riley had dropped. "A mess." "Voss," Hensley said, her voice measured, "you're alleging a conspiracy within Nexus Tech. That's a serious claim. Do you have proof?" Riley swallowed, then nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I recorded a conversation between Derek Henshaw and a Cipher Labs rep on December 10th. It's on my laptop, unencrypted, time-stamped. They discuss framing Elias and splitting the profits." She pulled the device from her bag, hands shaking slightly as she handed it to the bailiff. Langston leapt up. "Objection. This is hearsay, unverified audio from an unknown source." Elias stepped forward before Hensley could rule. "It's not hearsay if it's a party admission, Your Honor. Rule 801(d)(2) of the Federal Rules of Evidence, Henshaw's a Nexus Tech employee, speaking on their behalf. And Riley's a first-hand witness, not a third party." Hensley's lips twitched, almost a smile. "He's right, Counselor." Objection overruled. "Play the recording." The bailiff connected the laptop to the courtroom's audio system, and Henshaw's voice crackled through the speakers, "The kid's perfect, some teenage coder with a big mouth. We plant the breach on him, sell the code to Cipher, and no one digs deeper." A second voice, cool and clipped, replied, "Make it clean. Carver's IP, his phone, tie it up tight." The audio cut off and silence descended, thick and electric. The jury stared, wide-eyed. The gallery buzzed until Hensley's gavel cracked the air. "Quiet," she snapped, then turned to Langston. "Counselor, did your office investigate Mr. Henshaw's ties to Cipher Labs?" Langston stammered, We relied on Nexus Tech's internal report. They identified Carver as the culprit." Elias cut in, his tone sharp. "They lied. And you didn't check. Due diligence stops at the first convenient suspect?" Hensley's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Carver, you've got a point. Ms. Voss, why didn't you report this sooner?" Riley's voice steadied. "I tried. I went to my supervisor, but he brushed me off, said it was above my pay grade. When Elias was arrested, I knew I had to act. He doesn't deserve this." She glanced at him, gratitude in her eyes, and he nodded back, a pact forged in shared courage. Elias faced the jury, his voice rising with purpose. "This isn't just about me. It's about what happens when people in power cut corners, when they pick a target and build a case to fit. I'm 17, yeah, but I'm not invisible. I've spent years learning, building, dreaming of a future in tech. They tried to steal that because I was an easy mark. But I'm not here to be a victim, I'm here to fight." The words landed like a thunderclap. A juror wiped her eyes, another nodded slowly. Hensley watched, her expression unreadable but softer than before. Langston tried to rally. "Your Honor, even if this audio is legit, the defendant's fingerprints were on the encrypted files found in his room. He's not innocent." Elias didn't hesitate. Those files? I downloaded them legally from NexusTech's public developer portal, sample code they offer for free. I was studying it for a school project. The encryption was mine, I added it to practice security techniques. The prosecution assumed it was stolen because it fit their narrative. Did they test the files against the breached code? No. They didn't bother. Langston paled. Hensley sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. Mr. Langston, I'm starting to wonder what did get bothered with in this case. Mr. Carver, anything else? Elias nodded. One more thing. I move to dismiss all charges. The evidence is tainted, the witness is compromised, and the real criminals are still out there. The gallery held its breath. Hensley sat back, studying Elias, not as a kid, but as a force. I'll take that under advisement, she said finally. Court's recessed until tomorrow. I need to review this mess. The gavel fell, and the room erupted, reporters scrambling, spectators whispering. Elias exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time. Riley stepped down, murmuring, "You were incredible." He smiled faintly. "We're not done yet." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, a promise of clarity. Elias had turned the tide, but the final battle loomed, and with it, a chance to rewrite his story. The courtroom hummed with anticipation on March 24, 2025, as Elias Carver returned to the defendant's table. The rain was gone, replaced by a crisp spring breeze that filtered through the open windows, carrying the scent of renewal. The gallery was packed, standing room only, with local news crews lining the back wall. Judge Hensley took her seat, her silver hair glinting in the morning light, her face a mask of resolve. Elias stood in his same faded hoodie, but now it felt like armor, proof that brilliance didn't need a suit. Victor Langston sat stiffly, his confidence eroded, while Sarah Patel watched Elias with quiet awe. The jury filed in, their expressions a mix of determination and respect. Hensley adjusted her glasses and spoke. "Mr. Carver, you've made quite a case. I've reviewed Ms. Voss's recording, the phone records, and your alibi evidence. Before I rule, do you have anything to add?" Elias stepped forward, his voice clear and unwavering. "Yes, Your Honor. This trial started with assumptions, about me, my life, my potential. I'm not here to prove I'm perfect. I'm here to prove I'm not a thief. I've spent years teaching myself law and code because I believe in building things, systems, solutions, futures. NexusTech and Mr. Henshaw tried to tear that down. They gambled on me being too young, too poor, too powerless to fight back. They were wrong." He turned to the jury, his eyes steady. "You've seen the cracks in their story, fake emails, spoofed calls, untested evidence. But this is bigger than me. It's about every kid who gets judged before they get a chance. I'm asking you to see the truth, not just for my sake, but for theirs." A hush fell, thick with emotion. A juror nodded, another clenched his fists, moved by the weight of Elias's words. Hensley cleared her throat. "Mr. Langston, your response." Langston rose, his voice strained. "Your Honor, the state stands by its evidence. The defendant's theatrics don't erase his fingerprints or the IP logs." Elias cut in smoothly. "They do when the fingerprints are from public files and the IP logs are unverifiable. You've got no case, just a frame job falling apart." Hensley raised a hand, silencing them. "I've heard enough." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, then settling on Elias. "Mr. Carver, I walked into this courtroom thinking you were a delinquent with a laptop. I was wrong. You've exposed shoddy police work, prosecutorial overreach, and a corporate cover-up, all without a law degree. That's not just skill, that's grit. The charges against you are dismissed. Case closed. The gavel struck, and the room erupted, cheers, gasps, applause. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, but Elias stayed still, letting the moment wash over him. Riley hugged him fiercely, whispering, "You did it." He smiled, exhaustion and triumph mingling in his eyes. "We did it." Hensley stood, her voice cutting through the chaos. "One more thing. Mr. Carver, I've seen seasoned attorneys falter where you stood firm. Whatever you do next, don't waste that mind." She nodded, respect, plain and simple, then exited to her chambers. The words lingered, a spark igniting something in Elias. He wasn't just free, he was seen. Outside, the sun blazed, and Lena waited, tears streaming as she pulled him into a hug. "I knew you could," she whispered. Elias hugged her back, the weight of years, late nights, borrowed books, relentless curiosity, lifting off his shoulders. The crowd parted as they walked away, a path carved by his victory. Days later, offers poured in, scholarships, tech internships, even a letter from a law firm impressed by his defense. But Elias had bigger plans. He started a non-profit, Code Justice, teaching kids like him, overlooked, underestimated, how to code, fight, and dream. The courtroom had been his crucible, forging a purpose he'd carry forever. From a mocked teenager to a quiet genius, Elias Carver didn't just win a case, he rewrote the rules.